go. Just a really quick video. I'll just wait for. I've never done a live before, so I have no idea if this is working. But I forgot something quite important, and that is, of course, that a number of you will be sitting your exams, I think, Tuesday. How are we all doing? Just came after watching your... I get confused because my year 11s are obviously, they will be doing their exams sort of next year, the May-June series. But of course, a number of you will be doing your exams on Tuesday. I just finished practicing paper 1. You are so helpful. Thank you so much. How many are sitting their first language exam on Tuesday? I think it's Tuesday. Is it Tuesday or Monday? My exam is on Tuesday. How are you all feeling? Are we ready? I'm sitting on Tuesday. Gosh. Hey, appreciate your help. As a homeschooling mum, your videos are so beneficial. Scared. Insecure about certain questions. Questions about specific questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. It's scary, isn't it? I guess you guys will be the first ones sitting the paper. Do you have any tips when it comes to words we don't know the definition of? It's difficult. Let's look at the writer's effect question first of all. And often what students find difficult is some of the vocabulary that's used. I would advise you strongly to not clutch at straws. There will always be more than 3 powerful images in a paragraph. So really do select those images where you know the vocabulary. Unfortunately, Cambridge like to select I think they can be quite challenging in terms of the vocabulary that's used. Obviously, if you're not necessarily the most voracious reader, you are going to struggle with some words which are used, but certainly for the writer's effect question, I would just make sure you select those images where you know the vocabulary. I feel a little nervous. So on Tuesday is everyone's exam. Best of luck to you. Tips on writer's effect, please. Gosh, I've created so many videos on the writer's effect. Again, select 3 powerful images that are particularly striking. There will be more than 3, so be sure to select the 3 that you are confident in sort of exploring the effects of the words which are used. Cambridge appreciate a response which is well organized. Obviously, I use this sort of 5 steps to success, but ultimately what is going to get you your marks is your analysis. So everything that comes after this, suggests, this highlights, etc., that is what's going to get you. Too much if you're struggling in terms of organizing a coherent response, because your analysis really is the most important. Interview and dialogue, please. What should we choose? Okay, so interview. I think, and rather woefully so, lots of students and I guess teachers always sort of assume the interview task is going to be the most straightforward directed writing task, but actually sorry. So for the interview, you really have to think carefully about the character or the characters which are presented in the text, and it's quite difficult because you have to assume the role. So you have to understand the character, your vocabulary choices, your sentence structure, all of those stylistic, I guess, techniques that you choose to use need to be appropriate for the character, if that makes sense. So I think the interview as a directed writing task can be quite challenging, but just ensure that you fully understand the character. How can I best come up with a concise summary and use connectives appropriately? Okay, so for the summary, I think, is another one of those questions where a lot of teachers think, you guys should know how to summarize, but actually it's quite difficult, the process that you have to go through in order to end up with a well-written summary. So of course you need to highlight your 10 points. If it's asking you to summarize 2 things, and I think Cambridge quite often ask you to summarize 2 things, ideally you want to find 5 bits of evidence for the first bit, 5 points for the second bit. Once you've highlighted those 10 points, you need to number them. This is particularly if you are trying to get a top grade, you need to do this thing called synthesize. So once you've highlighted your points, you need to number them on your paper. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. If you adopt a chronological approach, i.e. you start at the top and work your way down, chances are you are going to end up with a summary which is really repetitive. Cambridge want you to be able to group similar ideas together, and that's what makes it quite difficult. And of course, you are expected to reword any sort of phrases, adjectives where appropriate. Scientific terms, technical terms, that's okay to use in your response. But I think the summary can be quite tricky. Let's have a look. Sir, I'm scared of my results, although my paper went well, but our English teacher checks. Oh. So someone just asks, do I suggest answering the question paper? And it's, yes, I do. Once upon a time, or sort of 2019 and pre-2019, the directed writing question was the first question. And I always advise my students to answer that question last, okay? It requires a lot of skill to answer the directed writing question. As long as you give yourself enough time. Of course, there's the argument, yes, it is a difficult question. Is it worth doing that one first? That's up to you. But I think the way the paper is ordered at the moment is probably the sort of right order. I wouldn't start, changing the order necessarily. To be an appropriate synonym will do. Okay, so can you please explain how to find the writer's effect? Okay, so lots of questions about the writer's effect. What this question is essentially assessing you on is a number of things really, but can you understand what the writer is trying to achieve? And can you pick out 3 powerful words and images from each paragraph? It's really important before you even begin to analyze or annotate that you read each paragraph carefully and you understand what the writer is trying to achieve. And it might be worth, what I tell my students is to write a little note at the top by next to each paragraph. The overall effect of the language is da 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 da. Okay, if you've been watching my videos, you will know that each paragraph should start along the lines of the overall effect of the language creates an image of, and that will vary. I mean, the overall effect of the language creates an image of the character's. What I will say is that the overall effect, of course, is different from the first paragraph to the second paragraph. I'm a huge follower of IGCSE Success. Descriptive writing from an image. I don't actually teach paper 2 because my students do coursework, but in terms of what makes a successful piece of descriptive writing, obviously my students have to do a piece of a descriptive writing coursework, and I will relay the same advice that I give to them. You need to obviously have quite powerful imagery running throughout, so things such as similes, metaphors, personification. Your sentence structure is really important, vocabulary choices as well. I would actually go into the exam or memorize a group of, I guess, powerful words which you could hopefully shoehorn into your descriptive piece, just so you can show Cambridge, hey, I can use at least some ambitious vocabulary choices. The other thing to note about descriptive writing is that they are rarely static. You can have some movement. Okay, if you write something that's quite static, okay, it's not going to be an engaging piece of writing. So I always suggest sort of describing maybe a scene from afar, then a little bit closer, using that zoom in technique. So zooming into a particular part of the image or the scene, describing that, and then sort of focusing on something else. Any advice on how to prepare for different text types on question 3? From Alice. To answer the directed writing question successfully, you need, and I say this on my videos all the time, you need to be able to write a letter, write a newspaper report, write a formal report away from an exam question. So, for example, if I said to you now, I want you to write a persuasive speech encouraging your peers to join, whatever hobby it is that you like, to join your swim team or whatever. You should be able to do that. You should be able to structure something, to use necessary stylistic features. If you cannot write in each of those text types, you are going to struggle with a directed writing question. So I personally would perhaps practice under time conditions, writing within each of those text types, and then applying those skills to a directed writing question. How to maximize marks on narrative writing. Again, this is a paper 2 question, but narrative writing. Cambridge do not like. Sorry, it keeps disconnecting me. Narrative writing. Take the ordinary and make it interesting. Okay, write about perhaps something you have experienced and make it interesting. No witches, no natural, no end of the world narrative. Keep it nice and simple. And it's that kind of sort of story mountain thing. Think about your beginning, how it's going to hook the reader. Think about that climax, what's going to happen to make, I guess, whoever's marking your paper think, oh gosh, I wasn't expecting that. Think about the stylistic choices you make, sentence structure, vocabulary. Remember, you get more marks for your writing and style than the actual content of your story. So it's really important that your writing accuracy is sort of high on your agenda. can you get a star without reading fiction books? You can get, believe it or not, I have had many students in the past who aren't particularly voracious readers. Some have gone as far to say they haven't read a book in years, or they hate reading, but they've still managed to get a top mark. As long as your reading skills are confident and that you can analyze, you can infer, and you can do these kind of higher order reading skills, which I guess your teachers have been developing throughout your 5 years at high school, you can get a top mark. I would of course encourage you to be reading a wealth of fiction and non-fiction, because that really is going to put you in a good position to get a top mark. How detailed do you think the writer's effect response should be? I have quite a bit of detail despite. Okay, so I will be honest and say that most of my students in the past have gone over the word count. We need to stop obsessing over word counts. However, that's not to say to completely ignore the word counts. Let's not forget you have 2 hours. There's a load of new questions that you need to tackle. Generally, my students are language and literature students, so analyzing language, it's something that they're good at, it's something that they enjoy, so quite often they write quite a lot. But the general rule of thumb is once you've embedded your quotation, you've used your analytical verb, this suggests, this highlights, I would recommend you writing 2 comments per image, so that's 6 in total for each paragraph. Make a literature YouTube channel. If I had the time. So make a video writing a narrative and descriptive essays. Hello Manta, you have over 1,000 subs. Narrative or descriptive, which one would you recommend? They are both very different, whichever you are most confident with. How to write an article, sir? Usually, if Cambridge asks you to write an article, it's usually some sort of persuasive article. Not always, but you need to try and establish an engaging and sometimes chatty tone. So think about the persuasive features which you could use to achieve that. How can I expand my vocabulary? Such a perennial question I get from my students all the time. How can you expand your vocabulary? You need to read. It's very easy for me to say you need to read. It will help, but also looking at the fiction papers which are available on the Cambridge website, look at the type of text that Cambridge asks students to read and understand, and look at the kind of vocabulary which they use. No doubt there's usually about 3 to 5 unfamiliar words. Would you say it's too late? Okay, guys, I was only supposed to spend 5 minutes on here. I really was just jumping on here to wish everyone good luck for Tuesday. You can do it. Best of luck, and I will see you again very soon.